We will hear a venture perspective on the future of work delivered by Marvin Liao from 500 Startups. Thank you. Yes, Marvin,
Right.
please.
Right. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. What an exciting panel to sort of come after. So what I was told to talk about is, as apparently this is about AI, and so I was told to come and talk about the future of work in this new world that we're actually entering. And so before we get started, I have roughly about 20 minutes, so this should be 20 minutes with about 5 minutes of questions, hopefully. So I timed it yesterday. Hopefully we'll not run over. Let's go over. So who am I, right? This is an established credibility slide. My name is Marvin. I'm actually a partner at 500 Startups. 500 Startups is actually a global venture capital fund in the early stage. We've invested in over 2,100 companies worldwide over the last 8 years. And because of this, I think my sample set and my view on what is happening in the world is very, very different, I think, than a lot of other people. Additionally, I've been in Silicon Valley now close to 20 years. Was in startups for a couple years, so I was an ex-operator, was an executive at Yahoo for about 10.5 years, and I've been a VC now for close to 5 years now. I have had, and I run our accelerator program, so we've invested over 374 companies over the last 5 years, so also have very, very active in this space. And I think because of this, because we're very, very early, I see a lot of things and a lot of trends that I think hit before sort of like it hits the rest of the world, before it hits the media. And I'm going to share a little bit about sort of my views and perspectives on where the world is going. So a couple things. Number one, the fall of big corporates and big anything, right? And so what does this mean? If you take a look at what is happening, sort of in the corporate world, and I would say in big organizations in general, if you look at the S&P 500, the lifespan, the average company lifespan of S&P 500, probably 50, 60 years ago, was over 50 years. And now, if you look at the numbers, it's roughly about 14 years. And so what you're seeing is actually larger organizations and companies dying faster than ever. And there's ramifications for this. Why is this happening? This is happening because we are undergoing, as you all see, massive, massive change in the world, right? A lot of technological trends, a lot of like demographic trends, a lot of economic shifts, right? From like the west to the east. So there's a lot of things happening all at the same time, and this is actually impacting dramatically the abilities of corporations and impacting how corporations and organizations act, right? And because of this, why is this happening? Because if you think about, and anyone if you've been in big organizations, they're typically big, dumb, and slow, right? They don't move very, very quickly. They don't learn very, very quickly. And so they're having a very, very hard time adapting to these like huge trends that are happening. And this is happening in every single area, whether you're looking at corporate world, whether you're looking in big governments, whether you're looking at big countries, whether you're looking at like any organization, academia, you're seeing these trends actually play out, right? You're seeing them not react very, very quickly to these things that are happening in the world and not adapting. Additionally, if you add on what's happening is that the cost of startups is actually declining dramatically. And so if you look at the cost of doing a startup now, it's actually declined over 100x, right? Think about that. The cost of doing startups has actually declined over 100x. And because of that, you see the proliferation of startups in almost every single sector. And I think Mark Andreessen wrote this really, really great op-ed in the Wall Street Journal many, many years ago. It said software is eating the world. That's happening in almost every single industry. And so what you're seeing is the rise of the startups, right? Startups happening in every single industry, and what is going on is that you're seeing elephants being eaten by ants, right? They're chipping away at small little pieces of market share. One example I remember, I thought about this, where just like about a couple weeks ago, I met the folks at Nestle, and out of all the companies, you go, this is an offline company, very, very dominant in ice cream, right? They're really, 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 really worried because they're starting to lose share to startups actually in the ice cream area. Right? People who are doing vegan ice cream, there's a whole bunch of like new boutique brands are actually eating away their market share that they're losing. They're very, very scared. So even in offline, so-called offline industries, this is happening. Startups are going after them. And so, because of this, there's a great quote by Cory Doctorow. It's like, the days of companies with names like General Electric and General Mills, General Motors are over. The money on the table is like krill. 1 billion little entrepreneurial opportunities. And so it does, even though there's like all these things are happening, it does open up a lot of opportunities. And because of this too, you see the end of what we call like big work, right? So a lot of these big organizations, if you think about the biggest costs of all these organizations, it's people. And so these companies are reacting to this, slowly, but they're reacting to this. And they're reacting in the way that most companies know how to, is by cutting people. And the way they're doing this is by two things. Remember, outsourcing. So outsourcing a lot of these jobs, usually white-collar jobs, to places like Romania, and also to places like India and China. And I actually think you're going to see this trend actually accelerate, right, over the next couple years. And I even think in some cases, a lot of the outsourcing that's happening here in Romania is going to start moving forward to other places, like even cheaper locales. And so even countries that actually risen on the back of outsourcing are in big trouble if they aren't actually moving up the value chain. The other thing that's actually happening is they're using software, more automation, and sort of adoption of like what I call AI, right, as you hear, or like robots or any type of machine learning. Because the reality is that software does do certain work better than human beings. And so if you look at the impact of this, that's why you're seeing a lot of jobs being lost in the world right now. And one example, I remember reading this thing just very, very recent. The World Economic Forum says that by 2025, that we're going to see jobs done by machines go from 29% to 50%. That's a lot of jobs. And if you take a look at another example, if you take a look at just truck drivers alone, right? We're seeing the rise of autonomous driving. Truck drivers in the US alone, close to 3 million jobs. Most of those jobs are going to disappear as autonomous driving becomes much more prevalent. And so this is just trucking. There's lots of other examples. And so let me talk about some of these other examples. Robots versus warehouse workers, right? So everyone's this big sort of like ballyhoo about sort of like HQ2, right, of Amazon. So, hey, they're going to build all these new warehouses. But guess what? I don't think it's going to lead to a lot of new jobs. So this is Mugen. This is a robot. Mugen is like a robot startup in Japan. And this is a warehouse from JD.com, from one of China's largest e-commerce companies in the world, right? And actually one of the largest e-commerce companies in the world from China. And they actually have built a warehouse that's all done by robots. There are no human workers. This is the future. This is the future. Another example, chatbots versus call centers, right? There's been studies and there's been some research that shows that when interviews with a lot of people, that 52% of people prefer to get customer service on messenger apps. And because of this, chatbots are going to become much more prevalent. And I think also if you look at a lot of the, I would say, sort of like customer sort of like preferences, 64 to 68% of customers prefer to get their answers in 24/7 and prefer to get their answers immediately, right? And who do you think is going to do that better? Probably chatbots, not people, right? This is going to affect the call center industry. And this is just like two examples. Lawyers, you think lawyers are not going to be affected by this world, right? This is like highly educated, highly paid roles. With AI, they've done this study. This is Law Geeks. Accuracy level of AI going and reviewing contracts, right? And reviewing risks. AI does it 94% versus lawyers, which is 85%. So from an accuracy level, and also I would say from a boredom level as well too, AI is better suited to do this. Software is better suited to do this. And so these are just 3 examples of like hundreds of examples of the areas that AI is going to affect, right? And if you think about even the example of like AlphaGo, going and beating like the world's best Go player, Go is actually one of the most complicated games ever, right? And AI can actually beat them. That basically means that this is going to affect most sort of what I call like white collar sort of like jobs in general, right? That require some level of like cognitive skill. But, it's not all bad, right? And so Jeff Weiner, he is the CEO of LinkedIn, had the pleasure of working with him at Yahoo. I'm not going to read the whole quote, but what he's saying is that as powerful as AI will ultimately become and is becoming, we're still a ways away from computers being able to replicate and replace human interaction and human touch. So the net about this is that working on sort of becoming, the skill sets of what makes us human, right? The customer service aspect, right? Not just, and I say customer service and sort of like dealing with people, nurses, these type of roles. I would say service in general, creativity in general, are what is going to allow us at least to have more efficacy in the future. And I think this also requires a big mindset change, right? So there's this great quote from Jay-Z. It says, "I'm not a businessman, I'm a business/man." And so what I think is going to be required to survive in the future is an entrepreneurial mindset. Not necessarily being that you have to do a startup, but you have to be much more entrepreneurial to survive in this brand new world. And I think there's several trends that I think make it very, very exciting, that sort of for us to become entrepreneurs now, right? So number one, the rise of platforms and global distribution, right? So now you can, because of these things like Facebook and LinkedIn and the Apple App Store and the Google Play Store, you can pretty much reach customers from all over the world, right? You literally can reach 2 billion customers across the world from wherever you are. That's a pretty powerful tool. That's something that I think we're not necessarily taking advantage of. Even Instagram, for example, is becoming one of the best and biggest platforms for building businesses on top of them. The other thing, because of this wide reach online, there's over 2 billion people online, which is great, more than 2 billion, you can actually niche, to go after very, very specific niches and still build a great business. So there's a guy named, Kevin Kelly, and he wrote this great blog post called 1,000 Raving Fans. And what he says is that if you have 1,000 raving fans, you can build yourself a great sustainable business to carry you for the rest of your life. And it's because of that. So for example, you want to focus on, sort of like women aged 20 to 25 focusing on buying sort of American Girl dolls, right? And you're building a blog site. You can probably build a decent business focusing on that area. I don't know why that came to my head, but that's just one example. There's all these niches now that you can actually focus on, that you can actually build very, very extensive businesses because of this global reach of all these platforms. Other thing too, knowledge is everywhere, right? You don't have to go to university. In fact, I actually think universities, one of the many, many big organizations I think are sort of in decline. Like you actually don't need to go to university anymore to sort of get a good job, right? Or to learn things. There's all these amazing platforms like Udemy, edX, Coursera, where you can actually go and learn this stuff live and take classes in every single space, whether it's programming, online marketing, copywriting, whatever, biotech. Like there's literally a class for whatever you want to learn. And this is something you're going to have to do going forward to keep yourself relevant. Digital nomads, right? Bogdan knows I love this space, but there's something about digital nomads that is actually the precursor of what I think the future of work is going to be, and this idea of geo-arbitrage. And so one of the benefits of being in a low-cost structure, in a low-cost country, Thailand, Romania, and making money from places like in the US or EU. So could you imagine you're in a low-cost country and you actually have customers and you have partners where you're actually making euros and US dollars or yen, that arbitrage opportunity is very, very good, right? Or you're a freelancer working from Romania, serving US customers, serving European, Western European customers in the UK or whatnot. This is an interesting opportunity, and this is one of the best things that's actually come out of the last couple of years that I think people are not taking advantage of. And because of this too, there's all this knowledge. There's actually a great way forward, right? There's lots of books on this stuff. So this should not be a mystery. You can learn how to do this stuff, whether it's the classes that you take, or there's actually a roadmap specifically for people to learn these things of how you build these side hustles and side gigs, how you get customers, how you build business systems that serve customers all over the world. And these are 3 books I recommend for everybody, whether you're an employee or not, you should read. It's very, very helpful and give you good ideas. And Gary Vee, right? I'm a big fan of Gary Vee because of just, if you look at his career and the things he's done, this is a guy who's leveraged a lot of these platforms. And he's become what I call like a media person, of like a one-person media company. And I think everybody, if you want to have some relevance in the world, you need to be able to leverage a lot of the social media, a lot of the media around the world, whether it's Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, et cetera, go down the list of Pinterest. You can build yourself a media brand around these platforms. And this is a person who's built an entire career on this. He has built a whole, not just his own personal media brand, but he's built an entire company around himself. They're doing something close to several $100 million a year, right? Servicing all the biggest companies around the world with their social media strategies. And he's also become a great investor based on this platform. And so I think you can learn a lot from this guy. So a couple key lessons. Number one, learning is earning, right? If you're not learning, you're toast in this upcoming world, which is changing very, very quickly. Second thing, your network is your net worth, right? And this is something I want you to think a lot about, of just not just building a network here in Romania, but building a network all across the globe. Because these are, your network is a place that you're going to get partnerships. It's a place you're going to hire employees. It's a place that's going to help you get customers and get revenue and get gigs. The other thing, you need to figure out the niche that you are going to dominate personally. Really, really critical. Side projects. Even if you have a job, you should be thinking about side projects to diversify your income streams. Because these jobs are going away. Most of the companies, most of the big companies are going to disappear over the next 10 to 15 years, and you're screwed, right? Make sure you're diversifying your income streams. And the other part is building yourself a portfolio of skills and incomes. It's all about diversification, right? And you really need to develop social skills. Like if you don't have some level of EQ, you will also have a very, very hard time surviving in this future world. And last of all is really becoming a media company of one. Learn to leverage a lot of the social media platforms out there. I don't care if it's Instagram, I don't care if it's like Twitter, I don't care if it's like Facebook, but learn to leverage these platforms because this is going to help you survive and have relevance in the future world. And so the thing I'm going to leave you with, which is a great quote, and thinking about this new world that we're entering, right? And this entrepreneurial world that we're entering, which I think AI is going to have a hard time replacing. Being an entrepreneur, I think, is a very, very unnatural thing, but I think this is going to become a survival skill. So Tim Ferriss had this great quote: the more voluntary suffering you build into your life, the less involuntary suffering will affect your life. And think about it, that's what entrepreneurism, right, is, but it is a survival skill. And I hope you guys learned something for this presentation, and I'll open up for questions. Thank you very much. I hope there's questions.
Questions? Is it working?
It's not.
Yeah.
You said at some point there will be more professions will be affected by the coming of the AI and everything else. I'm personally interested. I'm doing sales.
I think sales, like there's going to be aspects, sales is actually one of them where I think that there's going to be, if you're doing like people-to-people business in general, like particular sales, nursing, I think that they're going to be more robust, and so I think they'll last longer over time, and I do think that most folks will have to learn some level of sales skills. I think the things that are going to be hard to replace by AI, in my opinion, artistic skills, right? Like creativity, artistic skills, entrepreneurism. I think sales is a people-to-people business, so I think that is going to be one of the more robust skill sets.
Thank you.
We have another question right there.
Hi, Marvin. Thank you for being here. So you were talking at the beginning, you had one slide on the average lifespan of big companies, and it was shrinking to 15 years as the average.
Yeah.
So talk to us a little bit about the, I guess, skill set that big companies need nowadays to survive, adapt, better to this ever-changing landscape.
I think the challenge and I've thought a lot about this problem, right? Like, and it is a big problem. So you see a lot of companies now have kind of really, really woken up to the startup economies, woken up to sort of the importance of innovation, right? The problem with a lot of large organizations, I can spend a whole nother presentation on why large companies are just screwed in the long run, because the nature of big companies and organizations in general, they're built around a business model and built around processes and a mindset in general about maintenance, right? And so the problem that they have, and this is very unnatural, when you build an organization, and I think this is a reflection of human beings in general, we don't like change, right? And so when you build a big organization, it's not about cannibalizing yourself, it's actually about building and actually protecting sort of the core revenue streams. And because of that, that makes it very, very hard to go and cannibalize that old business, which actually makes them very, very unsuitable to change, right? And makes them unsuitable to adapt new innovations, because processes ultimately kill new things. Processes are made to maintain, right? And made to keep deviation away from their core business. And I think the problem, if you look at what innovation and startups represent, startups rule because you start with a blank piece of paper, right? And you can also adopt the latest technologies and platforms that big companies have just an old, I would say, like mindset that is just very, very hard to change, and cultural shifts. And also the type of people that work at big companies aren't necessarily innovative, right? Those people get pushed out. And so, like I said, it's a longer conversation, but they're just not structured very well for a fast changing sort of like environment. Does that kind of answer your question? So here's a problem with a lot of big trade. So the question is like, are you seeing big companies actually do the things they need to do to survive? No. And the reason for this is because if you're a publicly traded big company, a lot of these initiatives you put in place you will not see results for probably another 3 to 4 years. And the problem, if you look at the average tenure of CEOs, it's changing very, very quickly. And if you're being tracked on a quarter-by-quarter basis, and you have to make a huge investment that is going to impact your 1 or 2 quarters, which is ultimately going to impact your main business line and your survival, you're probably not going to do it. And that's something you see over and over and over again at most of these publicly traded companies. And so they're just not very well suited to invest in for the long period of time. Just my opinion and what I see.
Marvin, so here. No, I hear.
Okay.
Question.
Yeah.
It's maybe easy for everybody to understand numbers. So let's say, how many hours a week do you work? How many hours a week people in San Francisco in a startup work?
So the question, how many weeks do I work? How many hours a week do I work? Is that right? I work a lot. I probably do about 80 to 100 hours a week. So everyone jokes, right? San Francisco is kind of like the Las Vegas of work, right? It's pretty competitive. But having said that, this is nothing. Like, we are considered weaklings compared to China. There's this term in China called 996. Have you heard of this? They work 9 to 9 every single day, 6 days a week, right? Like, that's normal. That's normal. So, like, they look at us as weaklings. It's nothing, right? And so this is unfortunately the world that we're entering, right? And so I spend a lot of time working. I like my work, right? So I don't see it as a bad thing. And I spend a lot of my time reading. I spend a lot of my time talking to startups, talking to corporates. And so my work is super interesting, so I don't consider it really work. But boy, it would suck if you're doing a factory job that long, right? And so this is, in some ways, I think the rise of AI and automation is going to be a good thing in the long run for human society and civilization, because it's going to remove a lot of these like shit jobs, pardon my French, right? It's going to remove a lot of these crap jobs that human beings are not necessarily like well suited for, right? Whether it's like warehousing, packing, like these are like, no offense to the folks who are doing this right now because they have to, but these are mindless jobs that robots and machines and AI are better suited. Like, we are driven by creativity and innovation. And I think what is going to happen in the long run, even though there's going to be a lot of dislocation and pain in the short run, is that this will free us up to do what human beings are really good at. And so I think I'm excited about it in the long run. I am concerned about how this is going to affect all our societies, at least in the next like 10, 15 years. But in the long run, 20, 30 years of how the world that I see my daughter growing up in, I'm very positive. And so I think hopefully we're going to enter the world of like Star Trek, right? Like, it feels, hopefully that is the direction that we're going. Does that kind of answer your question?
One last question there.
All right.
Hi. How do you envision the future of educational institutions when it comes to reskilling the tremendous number of people who will lose their jobs because of automation and so on?
I actually don't think I don't think universities are going to be well suited for this reskilling. I think you're going to see, as I mentioned, the platforms are like Coursera, edX, or whatever. You're going to see a lot more like, sort of online sort of like training is going to become much more prevalent. That's my opinion. And so even though a lot of them have not done well in the short run, I think in the long run, they're the best suited for reskilling and retraining. And it's also most up to date. It's easier to keep up to date too.
Marvin, thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.